When it came to Ridge Forrester, Brooke Logan believed that their connection was one of a kind. It was more profound, more resilient, and beyond the reach of conventional heartbreak. Although she had experienced the ups and downs of love throughout her life, she believed that their connection was exceptional. They had fought for each other over the course of many years and across numerous nations, weathering the kind of turmoil that would leave the majority of people disturbed, if not utterly shattered. They had done this together. On the other hand, here they were, stronger and more self-assured in their relationship than they had ever been before in their whole history. According to her, it was the case. Nevertheless, all that was required was a cursory examination of Ridge's phone in order to thoroughly disprove that notion right away. While Ridge was out, the message was found on his phone, which he had left unattended. Ridge had left his phone unattended on purpose. Despite the fact that Brooke had no intention of probing, her curiosity got the better of her when she found a name that she had never heard of before among the texts that he had sent in the recent past. She was taken aback when a straightforward text message opened the floodgates to a flow that she had not anticipated. The screen was tapped by her. A night like the one before was definitely one to remember. Keeping this a secret for any longer than necessary is a waste of time. As if the words were a torrent of acid that reached her very being, it was extremely distressing. As she continued to read the lines, she noticed that her hands were beginning to shake and that her heart was pounding. During this time, she was praying that the words would be altered in some way. It seems clear that this was a mistake. Perhaps the message was meant to be delivered to someone else the entire time. On the other hand, her instincts were leading her to believe that she was on the wrong track. Everything that Ridge has been doing recently, including his recent display of aloofness, his attempts to mask his distant glances, and his late nights, all came together to make sense. As Brooke held her chest, her breathing became weak and irregular. She was unable to control her breathing. The house created the appearance that it was turning around constantly. As she attempted to get back to the couch, she staggered back to it, trying her best to ignore the emotions that she was experiencing. How is it even possible for him to accomplish that? How could Ridge possibly do something to her after everything that they had gone through, after every tear that had been shed, and after every promise that had been made? When Ridge did finally return home that evening, Brooke had already made up her mind. She needed to know the truth, regardless of how dreadful it would be. However, Ridge did not return home until the following day. She waited until he had settled in and then observed him go about his daily routines, utterly clueless to the impending storm that he was about to face. After that, she waited until he had settled in. She became conscious of his calm demeanor and studied his behaviors as he approached her and kissed her on the cheek as if nothing was occurring. He did this as if nothing was significant. Despite the fact that she was already in pain, this made her condition even worse in some way. When she yelled out, "Ridge," her voice was forceful, but had a hint of melancholy underneath it. As a result of being taken aback by her tone, he shifted his focus to her and became aware of the rigidity in her stance. "Brooke, what am I doing wrong?" Within the span of a single minute, she was able to catch a glimpse of genuine worry in his stare as his eyes searched hers. The flavor of each sentence that she was uttering in her mouth was caustic, and she continued to fix her stare on him. "Please tell me her name." He was taken aback and blinked, but he covered his expression with a mask of doubt as quickly as he could. "Brooke, are you serious this time? What exactly are you referring to then?" There was no sign of hesitation on the woman's part. "As for me, Ridge, I was able to detect the message. The previous evening was one that everyone will remember for a very long time. All right, let's stop keeping this a secret for the rest of our lives." In spite of the fact that her voice was shaking and she loathed herself for it, she had no choice but to let out a voice because it was required. Ridge's face turned a very ghostly white as the repercussions of his actions began to overwhelm him like a tsunami. His normally calm demeanor began to break down and he became increasingly anxious. Brooke felt her heart sink even further as he moved his head away from her, despite the fact that he was unable to meet her gaze face to face. In spite of the fact that she had placed her trust in him beyond all others, the man she loved had been dishonest with her. "Brooke, "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he whispered, the sorrow that was evident in the tone of his voice. "I'm sorry." On the other hand, the words that he stated did nothing but feed the flames of her fury within her. Then, is that the case? Her eyes started to well up with tears, and her voice was hardly audible above a whisper when she finally came to terms with the truth that he had betrayed her. She had finally come to grips with the circumstance. When we take into account everything that these two of us have been through, Ridge, what is the possible way that you could bring this upon us? In an effort to shield herself from the discomfort, Ridge took a step toward her and extended his hand to her. However, she rebuffed his efforts and crossed her arms over her chest in an effort to shield herself from the pain. Ridge's attempts to make contact were fruitless. "Brooke, if you would please just give me a moment?" With a sneering expression, she expressed her displeasure through her remarks. "Is that the case? What is the most appropriate approach to convey this? You have been having an affair with another individual behind my back. I am totally unaware of this. For how long has this been going on? Do you have any idea? Was it your intention to keep me in the dark for the rest of my life? Or were you planning to reveal the truth to me at some point in the future?" It was written all over his face that he was hanging his head, despite the weight of the regret that he felt towards himself. There were no plans in place for the event to take place. Not to put too fine a point on it, it did. In the course of this period, things have been difficult between us, and I thought, is it challenging? After that, she started to interrupt, and her voice took on an air of surprise as she did so. Is it not one of the reasons you give? In light of the fact that the circumstances have been difficult, assuming that we had been through enough to understand that love is not always a simple thing to accomplish, I assumed that we had been through enough. I was under the notion that we were able to find a solution to both of our problems together. Brooke's remarks had the weight of 1,000 promises that had been broken, and they echoed throughout the room as they spread across the space. She looked at Ridge, trying to discover some sign of regret, some indication that he realized the magnitude of her anguish. Yet, his silence only served to make her predicament even more difficult. She believed that he would acknowledge her suffering. "I trusted you, Ridge," she mumbled as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I trusted you. I put my faith in you. You were the only person beyond whom I had the utmost confidence. You then threw everything away, but for what reason did you do that? How about a casual affair? What exactly is a distraction?" When he drew a deep breath, his own eyes were filled with regret, and he did so with this feeling. "In all honesty, Brooke, I had no intention of causing you any pain. A moment of weakness. The error was a mistake, and it was a moment of weakness." "Wait a second." Brooke laughed regretfully, despite the fact that she was using the back of her hand to wipe away the emotions that she was experiencing. In the event that this is the true, then it begs the question, why did she say that she no longer desired to conceal it? What do you think about the fact that this seems to be a little bit more than a moment? In order to provide her with the necessary assurance, Ridge's silence was the essential factor. Brooke got the feeling that the walls were closing in on her as a result of this betrayal, and every memory that they had experienced together was tainted with a sense of taint. During her thoughts, she recalled the instances in which she had defended him and fought for him, the instances in which she had laughed with him, and the instances in which she had loved him. Furthermore, at this point, the only thing that remained for her was the utterly debilitating sorrow of being betrayed. The final thing she said was, "Get out," and her voice was completely devoid of any emotion. Ridge sent a horrified glance in her direction, but she did not exhibit any symptoms of flinching in response to his gaze. "It is so difficult for me to look at you right now that I can't even force myself to smile. Moreover, I implore you to just leave." He opened his mouth as if to contradict the assertion, but something in her eyes told him that there was no room for debate. This was despite the fact that he had opened his mouth. Brooke was left standing alone in the empty room, her heart devastated as Ridge rounded a corner and exited the room altogether. Before setting off, Ridge had given her one last look before departing. When the door closed behind him, Brooke was overcome with tears and sank into the couch. He was overcome with emotion. Sobs were raging through her entire body. Previously, she had experienced a great deal of anguish, But nothing quite like this had ever happened to her. This was not just a broken promise, but it was also the steady breakdown of a love that she had believed to be unbreakable. She had imagined that this love would last forever. For the very first time in her life, Brooke Logan was confronted with intense sensations of being shut off from the world. Because of this, the lady who had always fought for love and who had believed in it beyond all else was left wondering if she would ever be able to believe in it again. She had always believed in love.